They say semen retention is a lust killer, and that is the topic of today's discussion. Welcome back to Hypnovision Studios. Indeed, you may have heard the phrase, lust is one of the seven deadly sins, but it is very interesting, the word seven, or the number seven, because there is seven chakra centers in the human body. And yes, chakra and shakya may be spelled different, but there is a hidden link here that most people miss because the chakras are a form of energy centers within the body. This is how the energy flows through the nervous system. And as we get started in this topic today, I want to point out what is obvious. The magnetism, the main attraction, and the red and blue lights behind me, the nervous system depicted on the shirt, how the energy is flowing in a spiral, and the red and blue. Most of you would know that when red and blue is mixed, we get the color purple. And in spiritual understandings, the color purple often represents royalty or either the crown. And when we look at the color centers and the alignment with the chakra centers, the crown chakra is often purple, the highest of enlightenment that one can reach. So, how this relates to the nervous system, we are going to unfold that, but we are going to look at this specifically through the lens of lust and semen retention. With that said, guys, we have to understand that the internal electrical system of the body is the nervous system. And the electrical impulses coming out of the body is a direct form of the sensory and stimulation that is happening within the body. So if you've ever heard that we live in a simulation, the best way to understand this is the stimulation within the nervous system creates the simulation of what we feel. Now, I want to point this out as we get started because I've said this before and most people thought it was funny. But the word feel and the word feel, they're spelled differently, right? There's a lot of things in life that are homophones, and we can very easily mess the double entendre here. Because on one hand, to fill a balloon with air would mean to force air into the balloon and it expands it. It fills the balloon with air. On the other hand, human beings have feelings. I feel sad or I feel happy. I feel love or I don't feel loved. So we can take this metaphor and understand this in a duality aspect of my feelings fill my body with the emotion, and it is a double meaning. I am filled with the emotion of love. My cup runneth over. I am overfilled with joy. So, with that understanding, we can start to really draw a picture here because the balance of the nervous system is how we take the blue and the red and we merge them into one whole construct, right? If we overstimulate one side of the nervous system, it is overcharging that side. So if we enter into fight or flight, the noise of all that is going on in fight or flight can overshadow the signal that is coming from rest and digest, meaning the signal is always trying to tell us something. And in hindsight, for me, once I started to do meditation, it was probably the first time in many years that I was in a state of relaxation where my body felt safe, regardless of what my mind was thinking. And for the first time, I started to experience thoughts that I never had before. And that was coming from the opposite side of my nervous system. You see, it is very much true that we can enter into fight or flight and remain there for a very long time. Because what happens in the nervous system when we start to polarize to one side or polarize to the other side is the chemical changes in the body. When we enter into fight or flight, we raise our cortisol, our adrenaline glands, which secrete chemicals, become overreactive or overproductive. And if we stay in one side for too long, we put a enormous amount of tax on the nervous system. Yes, if you listen to the words that I'm saying and think about other things in the outside world, right? Attacks on the nervous system, how energy flows like a current. A bank, right? A bank does what? They let you deposit money. They also control the cash flow. What does a river do? A river is contained within the banks, and a river flows down towards the ocean, so to speak. If it's coming from the mountains, gravity is going to pull it down to the ocean. This really makes me think about Napoleon Hill's work with the sexual transmutation of energy and how trying to block something will create a dam. And if there is enough pressure applied to that dam, something will eventually break. Now, in Napoleon's work, he talks about redirecting that energy. So I want to talk about lust specifically and how semen retention affects men and the psychology of things. And you have to bear with me. I'm using this new mic and it doesn't like to be on a t-shirt. It wants to keep pulling forward. So lust can be healthy when it is managed, but it also can be very, very unhealthy when we allow our emotions to rule us and we're not in control of that bank, right? We're not controlling the flow and things become out of balance. When we look at the Kundalini energy, it is a form of energy that comes up the base of the spine. And when we look at things like the Christ consciousness, some people will say that it is not a real thing, it's some new age babble. But honestly, think about this. If the imagination is ours to create with, then if we wisely use our imagination, we can create heaven or we can create hell on earth. And that feeling, right? The internal feeling is what we fill ourselves with internally. So if we are creating hell on earth, we enter into the fight or flight and we remain there until we decide to change because we have created a blockage that does not allow the energy to flow through the body. So lust is more of an appearance thing, right? It is often said that men are just visual creatures. They see something and they want to go and attack it. Not attack it for bad reasons, but you know, men just can't control their urges. So that is what we're going to discuss and how to keep it healthy but maintain a good balance with it at the same time. Semen retention doesn't kill desire, it kills compulsion. What semen retention actually dismantles is lust as a reflex. Lust is an unrefined form of automatic visual stimulus, which equals a dopamine spike. And from that dopamine spike, we get the urge. And from the urge, we want to release. And from that release, we end up with a crash. Why will we end up with a crash? Well, when we release our semen, our sperm, our seed, however you would like to define it, there is a tax on the nervous system. As I mentioned earlier, just like a tax, when we earn money, we are taxed a little bit of that earnings. The law of thermodynamics may not seem like there is a connection here, but the law of thermodynamics says that anytime there is an exchange of energy, a little bit is lost. And we understand this very simply. We can use the red and blue. We can say that red is fire, blue is ice, right? So let's just take ice, for example. It's still a form of water. It may be a solid, but if we heat ice up, then it will transform from a solid to a liquid. It is still a form of water. Now, if we continue to heat water, it's going to eventually become a vapor. And once it becomes a vapor, now it is able to lift itself and ascend into the atmosphere. Now, with that being said, it is still water. It has transformed from one state to another. So the statement that energy can never be destroyed, it only transforms, is very accurate here. But in that transforming, there is a bit of loss. And that is the law of thermodynamics, essentially. So the tax on the nervous system happens because the semen is a life-giving force. It takes more blood to create new semen than it takes for semen to create new blood. Because semen is such a potent life force fluid and it can create life, it takes more blood to create that semen than it takes for semen to create new life. And when a man expels it too often, too frequently, meaning it happens too much, it becomes out of balance because it also drains that life force within side of the male body. And that is very important to understand. It's not to say that you're a bad person or that you're doing something wrong, but once you start to understand the enlightenment of this and the energy flowing through the body, then you do indeed start to see how you, as the person retaining, gets the benefit from it. And lust is really, in my opinion, my belief, is really more of an appearance thing, right? There is a meme that I seen recently that says in nature, poisonous animals will often let you know that they're poisonous visually, right? And here's a picture of a meme. Yeah, I mean, take that ever how you decide, but it's true. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that will use their appearance to get what they want. It is often said that a man can be very attractive, but the minute that he opens his mouth, he loses attraction. And that's because of the fantasy that one builds in their imagination, which makes me want remember this here that I have. Imaginative attachment in adults involves deep, often idolized mental connections to people, relationships that exist more in fantasy than reality, stemming from unmet childhood needs, leading to overinvestment in imagined scenarios or figures, substituting for real intimacy and manifesting as intense, one-sided bonds like limerence or maladaptive daydreaming, especially when real relationships feel unsafe or unavailable. It is often linked to insecure attachment styles where imagination serves as a coping mechanism for anxiety or avoidance, creating rich internal worlds to fulfill desires for closeness, abstinence, or external notes. This also includes things like fantasy bonding, idolizing someone lacking real vulnerability, and substituting imagined scenarios for actual relationship building. This really highlights the importance of being vulnerable, right? To allow someone else into your inner worlds because the unmet parts of the child simply is a form of protection. When a child grows up feeling like they're not safe to express themselves or they were never allowed to really um, formulate for themselves, they learn to become whatever the caregivers or the parents need them to be. I spoke about this recently where you're walking on eggshells to make sure that one parent is always not getting upset with you. And the dynamic between the two, right, is sometimes the child learns to play one parent against the other. And when they grow up and they go into the outside world and get into their own relationships, that dynamic can still play out where one child or that child that is now an adult is very protective over their inner world through their imagination and they don't want to open up, they don't feel safe, but yet they still live in that imagination and they create this idealized person within that imagination and project it onto their partner or someone of their choosing. So the lust aspect of this is they long for that connection, they long to share that inner world with someone, but at the same time, they feel very insecure, like they're going to be judged or viewed in a bad light because they have thoughts that they were told were bad. If you put this in a religious context, we would tell people that you're bad for having this thought. You might even go to hell for thinking like this. Or if you have this thought, you're committing adultery and therefore it is a sinful thought. Well, is it not that very line of thinking that creates the conditions for someone to feel insecure about opening up? In natural law, Mother Nature does not apologize. Mother Nature is a creative force. You can't get a flower to apologize no more than a rose having thorns, right? A rose is a very beautiful flower, but it is also something that can hurt you if you're not careful with the thorns on it. So um, that has also been a very symbolic creation when it comes to love, for example. There's a lot of roses that are connected to romantic things. So, with that being said, we start to understand that the inner judgment or observation of one's fantasies become locked within the imagination, heart and key, and we don't feel safe opening up. So, we idolize this and we want to create scenarios where we can live out these fantasies with people that we don't have a intimate bond with. This would be like a fast moving, quick hookup and move on. And then after that, you want to destroy the person, never see the person again. We feel all kinds of shame and embarrassment. And then we treat that person with bad behavior. And that's because of this inner dynamic of the imaginative attachment. So in psychology, that idolization, we create that person up here that is not even real, and we project that onto someone else. That's is pretty much what that means. So limerence, for example, an involuntary obsessive state of admiration and attachment, often romantic, involving intense yearning and euphoria, despair based on perceived reciprocity, not reality. Fantasy prone personality, deep involvement in fantasy, using it to create a substitute for unbearable reality, often tied to high absorption of mental imagery. Now, let's talk about the high absorption of mental energy. Porn, pornographic stuff, right? That's basically if someone has a masturbation problem and they just look at porn all the time and they masturbate and they release, the mental energy is not even real. It's images on a screen and then we release. So it becomes over time an addiction to these type dynamics. But the reason I bring up um, the imaginative attachment in relation to lust is that creates this inner dynamic where we are always chasing after something that is not tangible. And the reason it's not tangible is because we can't open up. If we don't feel safe about opening up and expressing what that desire is, then it will always go unmet and we will always chase after that which we have not experienced yet. And that throws the nervous system out of balance. It creates anxiety because we fantasize and we just keep building this fantasy bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it goes on unmet. We start chasing this illusion that is not real. And the only way to make it real is to open up and discuss it. And that requires a bit of self reflection because when we look at Carl Jung and the unconscious aspects of things, until we make it conscious, it will continue to control us. It will continue to keep us bound and reliving that loop. So, limerence is an obsession, obsessive thoughts, which can become compulsive. Sometimes people don't know why they do what they do, but the energy, right? We've got to remember the chemicals. The chemical balance of the red and blue will create purple, which really raises that energy all the way up to the upper echelons of consciousness, the crown chakra. So when we start to understand this and we can go into a meditation, we start to learn to allow the energy to start to flow again, we actually start to hear the signal on the other side. we start to hear the signal of rest and digest, the creative aspects also. The interesting thing about this is we create these idealistic scenarios in our head, but we also create this paradigm where we say that these idealistic um, scenarios are not achievable. We can never have these things, even though we long for them, and we are afraid to open up. So it's very interesting, right? For me, over the past 3 years, semen retention has definitely changed how I view women in general. There is more arousal for life in general in creating on a daily basis. And especially when it came to creating my brand, um, things like creating women's clothes. Now, there was a fear previously, before I took that leap of how will people see me? Because I'm not a general man's man, right? I don't care for football. I don't care for a lot of stuff. Now, I spent 20 plus years in construction, metal fabrication. So yeah, that's kind of a manly thing, right? I was doing a lot of manly stuff, construction work. But when it comes to entertainment, I'm a music guy. I love creating and I love entertaining and I love music. So, you know, for me, there's always a balance of the two aspects, but I'm generally not into a lot of things that most men are in. So it was always hard for me to form healthy bonds with men, and I always would find myself feeling like an outcast to some degree. But also at the same time, I'm not an overly feminized man, so I don't fit in with women who have a lot of those guy friends, right? That's not who I am. But facing this within myself helped me to understand it, which is how I'm able to talk about it now. So when it came to the idea of creating clothes for women, it's not just for women. I create clothes for both sexes, honestly, but um, removing the aspect of lust, because I do think the feminine body is a very beautiful thing. It is something to be admired because let's face it, the humanity is the only thing on this planet that has the wonderful human imagination. So it allows us to imagine things, and if you can divert that sexual energy into something productive, something purposeful, now you can still admire the beauty of the male or female body. You know, you can still be heterosexual and still admire, like, hey, that's a good looking man, that's a good looking woman. And it doesn't come with that sexual undertones, and it doesn't come with that idolization of something that is only fantasy. Now, we all fantasize. We all sit around and use our imagination. In fact, when you start to use your imagination in a more visualizing way to create from, you are taking charge of it and you're not being controlled by things that come from your childhood that were never met. Because now you have been able to reflect on yourself and see these things within yourself and address them internally and open up about them. And that's exactly what this video is about. So when we take this back to lust and we understand chemicals, the alchemy of the body, and keeping a balanced body, meaning that if we overuse that wand, right, the phallic, our life creating the magic stick is probably the best way to put it. If we overuse it, we are depleting the chemicals that create life. And those chemicals, when we expel them and we're not expelling them for creation of life, then we are essentially wasting the energy. And the laws of thermodynamics, we lose a lot more energy that way when we're not creating life and we're just expelling it. So if we allow it to go back up the body, if we don't release it, it reabsorbs into the body. And that same understanding of it taking more blood to create semen than it takes semen to create blood, we understand that it travels back up the body and it goes back into the brain and it nourishes the mind and creates new life within the cells of the mind, giving us new neuro pathways, new expansion within the consciousness itself. And that is called enlightenment. The illumination is very interesting because, to me, there's a defined point in my life over the past 3 years of before and after where the enlightenment happened, which illuminated so many things of the past that were hidden from me. And with that illumination of those things also came a lot of blessings because it illuminated the lessons that I never learned and gave me the opportunity to exchange lessons and turn them into blessings. It also allowed me to release imaginative attachments, ideas of things that I wanted to experience in my life in a sexual context. Things like living out a fantasy, right? We look at something like 50 Shades of Grey. There's this whole fantasy of being dominated or someone taking you, right? Now, is it really being used that we are seeking after, or is it that intimate connection, that closeness? Because when we're babies, we're cute, we're lovable, we don't really do anything wrong, and people want to hold us, and so that aspect becomes an unmet need as we start to grow up, and we don't um, we want to be held and we want to be cuddled sometimes. There's nothing wrong with it. But we also become adults, and if we stay too much in that fantasy, we can start to grow unhealthy attachments to emotions and feelings that are only in our mind. If we can't open up and talk about it, if we don't feel safe talking about it, then it's hard to face it. People who have not entered into that or have not had that experience can't really know for themselves until they have had the experience. So, of course, to them, just like the imaginative attachment, to them, it's not real until you've had the experience firsthand. It can never be real. So, take that with a grain of salt. One thing people won't tell you, I don't think, that first time it happens, the enlightenment aspect of things, is never really going to be the same again. Um, you are enlightened about a lot of things, and as long as you stay on the practice, it's not like you're going to keep going through these multiple ascensions of um, this grand expansion. It is like a bunch of plateaus. You learn something, and then eventually there is this more gradual expansion. But when you go from not knowing and then having the experience and then having enlightenment, that initial aspect is going to be, if you look at drugs, for example, they say that the first time you get high, you will always be chasing that dragon because you will never get that same kind of feeling again. That same kind of experience of enlightenment, to me, really happens one time. You can have a series of enlightening events, moments of awareness, moments of realization, moments of expansion, but it will never be like the first time. And that's what's so important here to understand. Once you have that initial enlightenment, you understand the chemistry, you understand alchemy, and as long as you can keep yourself from being distracted, you can maintain that course. You can alter your future in the present moment. And you learn to be more present with people, and you start to disengage with surface level commentary, and you start to engage with more purposeful meanings. So take that with a grain of salt, everyone. I hope that you found something within this video interesting and maybe something that you want to research or discuss with a partner or for yourself. With that, guys, I'll see you on the next one very soon. Magnetism is a very interesting topic because it's not just about creating um, a generator or alternator. We can really see that in the outside world, how we create magnetism, but the human experience itself is something very, very different.